Okay, so in this video we're going to do two examples. Here's our first one. We're going to identify the restriction on the domain of this radical function. I'll also identify the range and the zeros just so we can keep on working with those skills that we need to keep intact. So with this, one thing that we're going to do, the first step is we're going to find the zero. And then we're going to graph. We're going to do this a little bit without a calculator, so I'd like for you to think about how to do this without a calculator. And I'm actually going to change the problem. I'm going to put a negative right in front of that 4x. Okay, so notice I put a negative right here. And first step is we're going to go ahead and find the zero. So I'm going to go ahead and just do what's inside the radical. So I set the negative 4x plus 7 equal to 0 and I solve. So negative 4x is equal to negative 7. X is equal to 7/4. So that's my 0. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph it. So this is my first step. This is my second step. Okay. So these are the things that I need to do, and I'm going to graph it. Well, I'm going to try and graph this without a calculator. And so I'm going to do a little bit of side work here up in the top right-hand corner. And I know that if I just have a radical function, the 0 is 0, and it's going to slowly grow all the way to the right. Okay? Well, I know that when I put a negative in front of x, what is that going to cause the graph to do? Well, it's going to reflect in an opposite direction. So it's going to cause a graph to go that way. And if you think about it, when I have x is equal to, let's say, 4, what's going to happen is it's going to end up equaling the square root of negative 4. Well, I can't do that, right? So that means this side is not going to work. But if I put in a negative 4, hey, that's going to turn it to positive, so that means it's going to cause the graph to reflect, and the ones that are going to work are the opposite ones going in that direction. So because of this negative out front, I know that the graph is going to reflect over the y-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot my 0, which is 7/4, and that's about 2. So I'm going to approximate, I'm going to put it at about 2. And the general shape of this radical function is just, that kind of curved graph. And that's exactly what it would look like. Now, you can go ahead and graph this on your calculator, but it's nice to know what it's going to look like even before you start working with it. And so that gives us a good general idea. So what's our domain? Domain is going to be from here in this direction. And so that means I'm going to get x's when they are less than or equal to 7/4. And that is my domain. Okay? My range, well, if I look at my range is what y values. Well, y values are only going to be above 0. So my domain is where y is greater than or equal to 0. So here, my range. So here is my domain, and here is my range. Okay? And we're going to work with this function here, and it's a parabola. So I know with a parabola, it's positive, so I know that I'm going to have this kind of general shape. So this is my general shape. It's a positive parabola, so I know it opens up. So what that tells me is that when I write my inequality, I'm going to be pointing in this direction and that direction. So it's going to be an OR. If it was negative, it's going to be an AND. And so now I'm going to find my zeros. So the first step is to find the zeros. And so I just look at what's on the inside, and I factor what two numbers multiply to 24 but add to 10. And those two numbers are going to be 6 and 4. So I'm going to go ahead and have x plus 6, x plus 4. The general shape is not good with what the zeros are, but it's just a general idea. So we have this. So I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. So actually what our graph is going to look like is we have a negative 6 and a negative 4. And so I focus on the fact that I have these two guys pointing to the right and to the left. So this guy points to the, oops, wrong one. This one points to the right, this one points to the left. So I'm going to have an inequality for my domain where x is going to be less than -6 or x is going to be greater than -4. And that's my domain. And notice that points to the left, that points to the right. This points to the right, that points to the left. So it works with the picture of the parabola. And if I was to graph this using my calculator with the actual radical in there, what would happen is I would get this picture. So this one up here is the parabola, and this one down here is the radical. And notice they have somewhat of the same behavior. And the radical is missing the negative piece because we can't take the square root of a negative. I mean, it's an imaginary number. We can, but we can't graph it, okay? So the parabola gives us the same information as the radical. This is hard to think about sometimes without a calculator. This is more common to us. We have a general idea what that shape is even without graphing it on a calculator. We can do it without technology.